just thought I could do a better job. I've been doing litigation for about 10 years in civil litigation. I'd been working at a law firm called Barron and Budd and done toxic tort work for a decade. So I'd been all over our state, all over. In fact, I'd been in multiple states working on cases, doing litigation constantly. So I felt like I would be a good fit for a trial bench. And then I thought, frankly, that I simply had a better temperament than the incumbent. And that
I do remember the incumbent.
So I just kind of thought that, hey, this is something that I can do. I'm qualified for it. And I simply thought that I'd be a better judge than the guy who held the job. And that's why I ran.
Good. Let the public know a little bit, what is toxic tort? So
toxic tort,
about
just generally, just not because we don't get bogged down too much and stuff like that. But toxic tort would be like, say, pursuing cases on behalf of people who've been injured by chemicals and or substances that cause disease. In my particular case, I was working exclusively on asbestos cases. So people that had been exposed to asbestos that had either contracted asbestosis, lung cancer, or the most lethal form of asbestos disease is called mesothelioma. There is no cure. It is a form of cancer that when it grows, it either grows in the lining of the lung or the lining of the abdomen. Essentially, as it grows, it turns the lining of your lungs or the lining of your abdomen into something very rigid, like an orange peel. And your lungs can no longer expand, or your abdomen can no longer expand. Your body, like a lot of forms of cancer, you start building up fluid. So the victims of mesothelioma, they often suffocate to death. They literally drown on their own body fluid, or they simply die from the aggressive growth of the cancer. You've probably seen those types of ads on television stuff for mesothelioma, and it is asbestos cancer, and it's deadly every time. And I used to represent people like that, people like working folks, just like my dad. I come from a blue collar family. My dad's an auto worker. My grandfather's an auto worker. My uncle was a pipe fitter. My aunt still manages a Chrysler plant today in Kokomo, Indiana. So I got to represent people when I was in private practice who were just like my parents and my grandparents and my whole family. So it was an honor to do that, to represent working people who unfortunately had been exposed to a toxic substance that was causing them illness or death. So that's what I did for a decade.
Yeah, I remember your firm. Your firm was very good at getting substantial recoveries for those victims. I wouldn't want to go that way.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is horrific to watch somebody suffocate basically to death. And then obviously, if you've ever seen somebody, cancer is always bad for people that have to deal with chemo. And a lot of people try radical pneumonectomies where they actually have a lung removed in an effort to prolong their life. So it's very aggressive. It's horrible to watch happen. Cancer is bad for all forms of cancer are bad, but some are more aggressive and than others. And mesothelioma is super aggressive, and it's always devastating to watch. So
that's tough. I know my wife had cancer, and it wasn't that particular type, but I've known people who had cancer, and it's the whole family suffers.
Yeah.
Okay. Give us an idea of some of the judicial accomplishments you've done and made since you've been on the bench.
Well, I've been on the bench now for almost 11 years. At the end of this year will be 11 years. In the time that I've been a judge, and I'm really, really proud of this. I've put about, it's a little over 420. I don't have the exact count, but I know I'm over 420 now, jury trials that have actually gone to verdict in the time that I've been a judge. And in the George Allen Courthouse, the Dallas County Civil Courthouse, I have put more cases to jury verdict than any other judge in that courthouse in the time that I have been that I have served. I'm proud of that. I don't want to claim that I'm outworking my colleagues. I just want to be able to say that they're not outworking me. So I have taken my job seriously since the moment I took it. You take that oath of office, you put on that black robe, and you have responsibilities, and that's to work. Number one responsibility is to get your job done. So if I have people come into my court and both sides announce ready, then we get after it. That's what taxpayers expect me to do, and that's what I'm proud of my record as far as the productivity on the bench. I have tried over 1,600 non-jury cases since I've been a judge too. So not only do I have jury trials, but non-jury trials as well. Um, the public may not know this, but you can actually go to dallasbar.org. The Dallas Bar Association, the bar association for essentially the city of Dallas proper and Dallas County, lawyers review and rate judges based on their performance. And if your listening audience would go to dallasbar.org, they can pull up my bar review ratings. I've been rated every year starting in 2000, not every year, I'm sorry, every other year starting in 2009. So they can see ratings going 9, 11, 13, 15, and most recently 17. And I'm consistently rated one of the best judges in Dallas County among the judges that are at George Allen. I don't say that to brag. I just say it that, you know what, the public in general, and especially the lawyers, they seem to appreciate the job that I'm doing. And I'm trying to do my best.
Evidently, you're doing a very good job. Share with us how George Allen Courthouse was prior to 2006.
Well, I certainly don't want to get in the business of, because I'm a Democrat, and I don't want to say, because it's certainly not true that 2006 wasn't a wave election year. All right. So Democrats took total control of basically the judiciary in the 2006 election. It was a wave election. And it's not like Democrats haven't suffered from wave elections too. I mean, we all know what happened to Barack Obama in 2010, and 2014 wasn't a great year for Democrats either. So I certainly don't want to say, and I would never, I just don't want to say that every Republican who lost in 2006 was a bad judge. Some people just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, just like some good Democrats have been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But there were certain judges that needed to be replaced. And I worked hard to help the entire Democratic ticket get elected. And I believe the vast majority of my colleagues have been wonderful judges for Dallas County since we all got elected. I think that we are all serious about delivering jury trials as quickly and fairly as possible. I think some of the environment in the Dallas County courthouses is perhaps a little bit more cheerful than it used to be. But I don't want to go. I know we're on record and we're talking live. I don't want to say that everybody who lost in 2000, every Republican who lost in 2006 was a bad judge, because that simply wasn't true. That's not true. That's not true.
There were some good judges.
There were some that needed to be replaced, and they got replaced. Now, of course, that's what happens in wave elections. Sometimes people that shouldn't get replaced, and it's happened on the Democratic side and on the Republican side. So I believe that we've done a good job though, since we took control, of trying to make sure that all the judges that are at that courthouse are doing their very best for Dallas County citizens. It would be the responsibility of the Democratic Party to remove those judges that are not doing their job. And that's why we have primaries. That's why we have primaries.
It's true.
And,
okay. Well, I can say this much. Prior to 06, one of the issues in the community was, in fact, by many Dallas citizens voicing that they didn't think they got a fair shake. That's disappointing when you hear that, because most people, all they really want is to be able to tell their side of the story.
That is true. And in my mind, if you want to be a good judge and you're serious about delivering justice to everyone, then your strike zone, just to kind of say, talk in baseball terms, your strike zone has to be the same for everybody. You can't you change your strike zone depending on the batter in the box. There's no such thing as white justice, black justice, Hispanic justice, Asian justice. There's just justice. The justice system is there for everybody. You don't have differences for rich people over poor people, plaintiffs' lawyers over defense lawyers. If you're serious about being a judge, then you have to be serious about making sure that everybody has a fair day in court. We don't owe each other livings as Americans. We owe each other, though, in our justice system, and that is this: everyone deserves a fair opportunity to be heard. If there are any judges out there, whether they be Democrats or Republicans, who aren't serious about making sure that happens every day on the job, then they don't need to be judges anymore. That's the way I feel about it.
A lot of people share that same conviction. You're active in the community and you participate in a lot of things over the years. Would you share with us some of those activities?
Well, I think that judges, the public in general, expects more from the judiciary. They want model citizens to the extent that we can all try to be perfect. I mean, no one's perfect, but they do expect us to lead not only within the profession and the practice of law and to set a good example for lawyers and other people at the courthouse, but they expect us to lead out of the courthouse too. And I'm proud of what I've done outside of the courthouse. Even before I became a judge, I was very involved in Habitat for Humanity. I've been a volunteer since 2004. I was a core volunteer from 2005 through about midway 2011. A core volunteer is someone who donates a minimum of 12 Saturdays a year to build homes for people that need help. And once I got married and had two small children, I've got a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old now. My wife said, you got to spend, you got to be here to help with it. Yeah. So I had to drop out of core volunteer status, but I remain a volunteer for Habitat for Humanity. And every year since I've taken the bench in 2007, every year, the Habitat for Humanity house that's built by the Dallas Bar Association has what's called Judges Day. Every year, I organize the Dallas County Judiciary to volunteer for that day and help build that house. I'm proud of that. I like volunteering for Habitat for Humanity because if you know anything about that organization, it's not a free house.
No, it's not.
It's not a free house. People have to pay for those houses, and they have to put sweat equity into their own houses, and they have to volunteer to build agree to build other people's homes. It is a wonderful organization that helps people who want to help themselves. It's not a handout, it's a hand up. And that's what I love about it. Then I've also, about 5 years ago, I helped start and have been constantly in the what's called the Dallas Bar Trial Academy. We want to try to help young lawyers learn how to litigate cases on behalf of their clients, whether they be on the plaintiff side or the defense side. We want to make sure that to the extent that young lawyers need training to properly represent people in court, that the Bar Association helps them be the best they can be. It raises the whole profession, regardless of which side of the bar you're on. And it also is better for the clients. I've donated over 200 hours to the Dallas Bar Association high school mock trial program. And that mock trial program helps not only DISD schools and other Dallas County schools, but also other school districts that come in for this mock trial competition. And I have been involved with that since 2007, trying to help young people who are still in high school learn more about the judicial system, learn more about the practice of law, and maybe one day be lawyers themselves. So, I've tried to lead by example on the bench and off. And that's what I think the community expects from judges. They want to see judges out there being leaders. And I've tried to do the best I can in that regard too.
That's very true. Now, as I remember, you received an award within the last 6 or 8 months, maybe a little bit longer.
Yes.
Could you share with us what that was?
Sure. I was named the 2017 Dallas County Democratic Elected Official of the Year. And I think, I don't know what goes into making that decision. That is entirely the decision of the party chair. Carol Donovan is our current party chair. And they make a call every year as party chair who they believe has been the best elected official between the last. We have an annual dinner every year, so the Johnson-Jordan dinner. And over that last calendar year, who's been the best Democrat elected official that we have in Dallas County? And I was honored this year. And I can't speculate as to why Carol did what she did. But maybe she feels like I've set a good example for the Democratic Party in Dallas County, both with what I've done on the bench and what I've done off. And I know that this isn't necessarily critical to your listeners, but for those who are Democrats, I mean, I've donated over $100,000 to either the Dallas County Democratic Party or to other Democrats who are running for office to help Democrats get elected. and to hold their positions and to help hold power in this county so that that all Democrats, whether they be white, black, Hispanic, Asian, Christian, Muslim, Jew, whatever, that we keep Democrats in office. I'm a Democrat and I'm proud to be a Democrat. I want to keep Democrats in power.
Speaking of that, 2018 is going to be a pivotal year. It is going to be extremely important that Democrats get out, vote, do what they have to do. Share with us some of your thoughts.
I agree that 2018 is a critical election year, and I don't know at this time. Obviously, we do have some candidates for governor. I don't know if the Democrats have fielded a candidate yet for attorney general. We know that Beto O'Rourke, I'm sorry, is running for United States Senate against Ted Cruz. And I've not seen Beto in person yet, but I understand he's a wonderful speaker and very passionate. I look forward to seeing him campaign. But here, there's that old expression, Fred, that all politics are local. So I'm going to talk about Dallas County.
Yes.
And we are going to have some very interesting races in Dallas County that are coming up in 2018. And at this moment, we have a Republican DA. And the Democrats are fielding two very well qualified candidates, John Crusoe and Elizabeth Frizzell. And whoever wins that primary is going to need all the help they can get to unseat the current DA. She is not going to go quietly, and she will put up a fight. And I think it would be wrong for all Democrats to just assume that the Democrats got that election in the bag.
Isn't that what happened pretty much last year? A lot of people assumed that my vote wasn't going to count. I don't need to do it because she's going to win anyway.
Well, if you're referring to what happened with Hillary Clinton, there may have been some people, especially in the states that are so close, like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Michigan, that may have thought there's no way Donald Trump is going to be president of the United States. Why bother? And then, of course, they got to see what happened. So if you sit out an election, you do so at your own peril. And what I would say to your listeners is that you should vote in every election, because even if you don't like the people at the top of the ticket, the people at the bottom of the ticket, people like me in the down ballot races, they have tremendous power over your lives that perhaps you don't realize. I'm a civil judge. I don't hear criminal cases, and I know that we're going to talk a little bit more about my court. But if somebody walks into court and let's say they do something rude and they give me the middle finger, they start cursing at me, I can hold them in contempt. And I have the power, contempt power, to order someone put in jail for up to 6 months without a jury trial. That's power. So you got to make sure as a Dallas County voter that when you're voting for judges, that you're voting for people that are smart enough to do the job and also compassionate, kind, thoughtful, because they're going to be trusted with power. And if you put power in the wrong hands, then you can suffer terrible consequences. Look at what's happening now. Just go to the White House. You've got somebody in charge who has a lot of power that should not have that power.
You're right about that.
But can I go back to the Dallas County race too?
Sure.
And I want to talk. This is going to be a very competitive race, because not only is the current DA of Dallas County going to drop hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars into that race, Pete Sessions, who is a U.S. congressman in Dallas County, who evidently doesn't even live here anymore, as I understand it, lives in the state of Florida. I don't understand whether you're a Democrat or
do that?
Well, I don't believe that the congressional rules require that you live in the district, or if he does live technically in the district, he may have an address, but from what I understand, he actually lives in Florida. I don't know how many people have told me that Pete Sessions doesn't even live in Dallas County. I don't know about you, and really, I would think that Democrats and Republicans could all agree that carpetbaggers are a bad thing. And what I mean by carpetbaggers is basically people that don't live in the district trying to run and hold power. They're not even a member of the community anymore. They don't live here, but yet they want power. They're trying to hold power when they don't even live among their constituents anymore. That's absurd for Democrats and Republicans. But what I want to say about that congressional race, there are a lot of candidates on the Democratic side. Pete Sessions is not going to go without dropping probably $3 or $4 million into Dallas County to try to save a job that he likes very much. The RCCC, Republican Congressional Campaign Committee, as well as the Sessions campaign, are just going to drop millions of dollars into Dallas County in an effort to save his job. His congressional district voted for Hillary Clinton. He knows he's got a fight on his hands. So again, all your voters listening out there, your vote matters in 2018 big time. You don't want to sit it out just because it's a gubernatorial year. And even if the Democrats don't end up having a great candidate for governor, we've got a great candidate for senator. And by the way, I happen to know one of the gubernatorial candidates, Jeffrey Payne. I know he's a passionate young man. I don't know any of the other gubernatorial candidates, but hey, look, even if you're not happy with the gubernatorial candidates, we've got a good senatorial candidate. I'm sure the party's going to come up with a good attorney general candidate, but we got great local candidates. So if you're a Dallas County voter, put it on your calendar, make sure you show up and make sure you vote, because your vote does matter in 2018, big time.
Is there a way that we can change that rule whereby the congressman does not have to be an actual resident of the district?
Well, and I don't want to speak out of turn because I don't have the congressional rules here in front of me. And perhaps I misspoke. Maybe the congressional rules do require that they actually have a residence within the district, but I have been told that they don't. But if they do, let's say that that's right, that they've got to have a home there.
Connection.
Right. Let's say that he does have an apartment, or he rents an apartment. If he's not really living in the district anymore, and I can't tell you how many people have told me that he lives in Florida. I know he's going to be confronted with that in the campaign. If that's true, he should just own up and tell people the truth. You know what? This address that I have in this congressional district, I may spend 2 or 3 weeks here in a year, and the rest of the time is all in Florida or it's all in Washington, D.C. And oh, by the way, I really don't give a damn about you people. You know, if he was just being honest.
That's being honest.
Yeah, that's being honest. I mean, you're just not.
The Metroplex Marines dinner out at Love Field last week. And when they announced him and he stood up and everything, and, you know, Marines can be very salty. You know, oh, he's here? He must have come just to make an appearance and go back to Florida. So, yeah. I mean, you know, people are getting the message that he really doesn't have their interest.
Well, and again, I think this is something that is shared by both sides of the political spectrum. Democrats don't like it. Republicans don't like it. If you're not going to live among your constituents and know their daily needs and daily pains and struggles and everything else, and you want to live a holiday lifestyle, and you really aren't among the people anymore that you represent, well, nobody likes carpetbaggers. You know, they just don't like them, and that's on both sides of the political spectrum. So I think I'm surprised the Republicans aren't challenging him, to be quite honest with you. You know, a primary opponent. Well, he's got a lot of money, and then that's, you know, he's got a lot of money in the bank. But I would think that Republicans within his district, if it's true that he no longer lives among them, that they could find somebody better qualified who actually will live among the community and try to address their needs rather than do it long distance from Florida or Washington, D.C. But hey, I'm not running for Congress, so let's.
Well, you know, somebody's going to have to do that. But, you know, for right now, let's talk about the Dallas County judiciary, how it is set up, how it's structured, and how effective it is now with the Democratic Party in power.
Well, obviously now the initial layer of judiciary, say, I can't really talk too much about the municipal judiciary, but there always are, just to talk general overview for your listeners, you have municipal courts. So if you're in Dallas County, you're going to have municipal courts in Garland. You're going to have municipal courts in Mesquite. They would handle such things as, like, say, Class C misdemeanors, speeding tickets within the city limits. The city of Dallas has a municipal court system. These are lower level criminal cases or civil infraction type of courts. Now, as far as the county system is concerned, you know, we have justice JP courts or justice of the peace courts, often just generally referred to as JP courts. They also hear, you know, Class C misdemeanors and or smaller type criminal cases, and then they have some civil jurisdiction as well, up to $10,000 in value, small claims, if you will, small claims court. Then from there, you have the county criminal system and the county civil system. You have state district judges. Now, Dallas County and most urban jurisdictions are like this. Tarrant County is the same way where we are right now. They have complete separation in their benches. Judges that hear only criminal cases, judges that hear only family cases, judges that hear only general civil cases. Now, if you go out into rural areas of Texas, you might have certain district judges that hear criminal, civil, and family all in the very same courtroom, all with the same judge. But in Dallas County in particular, you have the Dallas County criminal courts, you have the Dallas County criminal district courts. The county courts would hear misdemeanors. The criminal district courts would hear felonies. All right. And then over on the civil side, you have the family district courts, and the first part of it gives it away. They're family district courts. That's where you would have divorce, child custody, child support type issues. And they also have administrative judges in the family system. And then you have the general civil courts. Now, there are 13 district civil courts in Dallas County, and there are 5 county courts at law. I'm one of the 5. In Dallas County, the county courts at law are basically, for all intents and purposes, identical to the civil district courts. We both have unlimited monetary jurisdiction. Most county courts at law are limited to $200,000 or less in value. That's not the case in Dallas County. So basically, I hear cases that are worth $500. I hear cases that are worth $100 million. It just all depends on what lands in my court. Same thing over there on the district court side. All right. Now, the county courts at law are not only unique in the sense that, at least in Dallas County, that we have unlimited monetary jurisdiction, but for your listeners, again, the 5 county courts at law hear appeals from the JP court. So the justice of the peace courts, if there is an appeal from the JP court, not on the criminal side, but on the civil side, if there's a civil case that's appealed, it comes to one of the 5 county courts at law. So I'm one of the 5, and if people have cases in JP court on the civil side, it'll come up to me or one of my 4 colleagues. And that's kind of just a general overview of how the county judiciary is set up in Dallas County.
Most people have no idea of how it's set up. All they know is I'm going to court, and they don't know what the jurisdiction is. But they know that they're going to be sitting before a judge, and sometimes they're hoping and praying that they get a fair shake. Basically, that's about it for a lot of people. But there's some particular things about the county court at law that over the years, as far as the salary structure, there's not that much difference. Jurisdiction's not that much difference. And people just are not even aware. All I know is I'm going to court. They'll tell you I'm going to court. Now, if it's traffic court, they know the difference there. Judge, that's good. There's one other thing I want to ask you. Judicial philosophy. What is your judicial philosophy?
I touched on it earlier. I'm glad you asked me that question. I touched on it earlier, and if I, again, using baseball terminology, the strike zone has to be the same for everybody. And you have to apply the law fairly and impartially to everyone. And that's the philosophy is that, you walk in there as the umpire, and the ground rules are set by the law, by statute or by case law, and you set your strike zone, and it's got to be the same for everybody. So it's just be fair to everyone. I do have 3 rules that I follow as a judge, and I wrote them down, and I've had them up there on my bench since 2007. I've got it on a Post-it note, and it's pretty ratty now because it's been over 10 years. It's 10 years old. But and by the way, before I even go into court, and I know that not all of your listeners out there are Notre Dame fans, but right on the back hallway of near my chambers, before I walk into my courtroom, I have one of those play like a champion signs. You know how the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, all the players slap the sign before they enter the field, play like a champion today. I slap that sign before I walk into the courtroom. I know it seems kind of silly and ridiculous, but it's just as a reminder that it's time to get your game on and play like a champion. And what happens in the courtroom is not a game, but I just do that every time I go into the courtroom to remind myself that I have a job to do. And being a champion as a judge means being fair to everybody, being willing to listen to everybody, letting everybody make their case. You got to make difficult decisions, but darn it, you got to be fair to everyone. Now, I have 3 rules that I follow. Number 1 rule is, or a little reminder that I keep. These are the 3 reminders or rules. Number 1 is the robe does not make you smarter than everyone else. As a judge, there will be days in your courtroom where you have lawyers come in who simply know more about the case law in a particular area of the law because they specialize in it than you do. You're considered to be the expert in the courtroom, but look, the law is vast. And there are lawyers out there that specialize, say, in labor and employment, or they specialize in personal injury, or some other area of the law that they just simply know better than you do. So don't get a giant, just because you're wearing that robe, don't let it get to your head. Let your head swell and think that you're smarter than everybody else in the room. You got to listen to everyone and don't get a giant head or an ego. So be humble. Be humble. The second rule that I follow is be the same person on the bench that you are off. I've never wanted to, and I believe that I have consistently been the person on the bench that I am off. Some people, they get judge-itis. They put that robe on, and then all of a sudden they turn into a different individual on the bench than they are. That's right. I'm the same person, Fred, right now that I am when that robe goes on in the courtroom, and I don't turn into a different person. And the third thing the reminder that I've made for myself is to always remind myself that nothing happens until you decide it happens. There are people that are going to come into the courtroom all the time trying to pressure you to make decisions. You should rule when you're ready to rule. Be comfortable when you rule. Don't let lawyers or parties push you around because you are the chief in the teepee. Nothing happens until you decide it happens, and that's what you've got to be. You got to be in control of the courtroom. That doesn't mean that you got to have the big ego. That doesn't mean you got to let it go to your head. You got to be a nice person, but you do have to be in charge, and that's what people look for. They look for judges that are decisive and thoughtful, and I feel like that I'm hitting those notes, so to speak.
Now, people, they want a decision. They want a decision that win or lose. This is what people tell me. Win or lose, I had my day in court. Did you understand why you won? Oh, yeah. Did you understand why you lost? Oh, yeah. That's what they're looking for. Fundamental fairness.
It is, and I certainly can't speak for my colleagues. It is very, very difficult sometimes because you don't have time while you're up there on the bench to explain every decision that you make. Mm-hmm. And really what lawyers and parties are entitled to is a ruling, not an explanation. But I do take the time, especially in pro se litigant cases where I have individuals coming in to represent themselves without legal counsel. Sometimes I will explain to them if I have time, because sometimes the dockets are heavy. I've got to move on to the next case. I'll take the time to explain to them why they won or why they lost their case, if I can. Again, all judges are, if you've got 40 cases to hear that day, you've got to, but the importance is what you have to do as a judge is when you call a case up, that's your focus for the moment. Even if you got 39 other things to hear, you got to focus on the case in front of you and then make a decision and then move on to the next case. Now, if you happen to have time to be able to answer people's questions as to why they lost, then you can take the time to do that. And I try, depending on the circumstances. I can't always do it, though.
Now, there's something that you do that I haven't seen many judges do. You've passed out 35,000 copies of the Declaration of Independence, the Gettysburg Address, and the Constitution since 2008. Share with us what made you start doing that?
When I first, it was shortly after I took the bench in 2007. I happened to be reading USA Today, an edition of USA Today, and there was a poll in there where a little over 1,000 Americans have been polled about what's actually in the Constitution of the United States of America. Mm-hmm. And they focused on the First Amendment to our nation's Constitution, which gives every American 5 rights. You know, freedom of speech, free religion, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, and right to petition your government. That's all in the First Amendment. Now, of course, as Americans, Fred, we have more than 5 rights, but we get 5 of our rights from the First Amendment. Of the 1,000 Americans polled that particular day, 29% could not articulate one First Amendment right they had. Today, the First Amendment Center, and your listeners can look this up at firstamendmentcenter.org. They do polling pretty much every year on the American people, and they find on average about 30%, year in and year out, about 30% of Americans cannot identify a First Amendment right they have. When they're asked what's in the First Amendment, 3 out of 10 can't do it. Going back to the poll done by USA Today, once people were specifically prompted on the rights in the First Amendment, only 64% knew that freedom of speech was in the First Amendment, 19% freedom of religion, 16% freedom of the press, 16% freedom of assembly, and 3% right to petition your government. So that was an alarming amount of ignorance. Also, in that same poll, 97% of Americans thought that freedom of religion was important, but only 56% thought it applied to all religions. Wow. So I felt like, you know what? This is another way in which I can lead as a judge. So I ordered 5,000 copies of our nation's Constitution, along with the Declaration of Independence and the Gettysburg Address. It's all part of the same booklet. And I started passing it out to everyone who shows up for jury service in my court. And whether they serve on the jury or not, they leave with a copy of the Declaration of Independence, the Gettysburg Address, and our nation's Constitution. And then I encourage them to take more to pass out to their children and their grandchildren. Dallas County doesn't pay for them. I do with my campaign funds. And I've gone to high schools. And in fact, on election day last year, I went to Mesquite Horn High School for 2 2-hour sessions in their government class to help teach their government class. Sunnyvale High School out there in eastern Dallas County allowed me to address their junior and senior class in the gymnasium and pass out copies of the Constitution. I will go to any school district in this county, history class, history teacher, government teacher, civics teacher, and talk to their students about the Constitution and pass out more booklets. We have widespread ignorance of what's actually in the Constitution. We have widespread intolerance when it comes to religion, too. That same poll that I was just talking about, 55% of Americans think that the Constitution of the United States of America establishes a Christian nation. The words God, Jesus, Buddha, Allah, Muhammad, Ares, Zeus, Athena, or any other alleged deity or prophet, that doesn't appear in our nation's Constitution. That was done on purpose. That was not an accident. They knew what they were doing.
That goes back to English history where they had everything.
Yeah, it is certainly true that the majority of the founders of our nation were of the Christian faith. That is without a doubt. That's not in dispute. So a lot of people are like, wait, they're shocked and they're surprised that the Constitution doesn't mention God or Jesus or any other particular religion. Why did that happen? Now, we know that the Constitution was imperfect at the time of its adoption because exactly. You and I both know that we legalized as a nation slavery.
Sure did.
Every woman was excluded from the ballot box. The founders of our country were not perfect people by and large. By and large, they were very smart, but they were imperfect. They tolerated great evils. Okay, they tolerated slavery, and they tolerated the exclusion of women from the ballot box. And that was over half the population, Fred. Over half the population couldn't vote. But one way in which the founders couldn't have been more spot on right about what to do for a governing document was the First Amendment as it applied to religion. And again, the majority of them were Christians. So why didn't they basically say Christianity is the official law of the land? Well, first, I would think that, hey, look, there were other people here besides Christians, and they knew it. Jews were here, Muslims were here. But they knew their own history. Most of them had come from England. And if you go back in world history, and this is important, there was once a king by the name of Henry VIII. And he was important for a lot of reasons, but he wanted a divorce from his first wife. And the Pope, at that time, England was a Catholic nation. And the Pope wouldn't give him a divorce. And he said, well, wait a second, I'm the King of England. I'm the man. So what I say goes. So he was head of state. He created a different version of Christianity, called it the Church of England. He made himself both the head of state and head of the church, and he granted himself a divorce. And he broke England away from the Catholic Church. And when that happened, it caused hundreds and hundreds of years of religious violence between Catholics and Protestants. Christians were cutting each other's heads off. And your listeners can look up Oliver Cromwell. They can look up Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth. They can read about Henry VIII. So all this violence that occurred within Christianity, the founders of our country knew about religious persecution, religious genocide. They knew their own history, and they didn't want the government having any business in religious genocide or religious discrimination. So I would just say to all your listeners, it's so wonderful that we live in a nation of religious tolerance. If you want to be a Christian, great. If you want to be a Jew, great. You want to be a Muslim, awesome. You want to be an atheist, good for you. Whatever floats your boat. But the government's not going to pick a favorite, and the government's not going to be involved in religious persecution. We live in a great nation as far as that's concerned, and it couldn't have been any better. And think about how radical that was for the 1700s.
Got to be.
Yes.
Got to be.
So it was, again, the Constitution was imperfect, but it couldn't be any more perfect when it came to religion. They saved us. They have saved our nation from religious persecution and religious discrimination. And sure, we have some religious violence in our nation, but the government isn't involved in it. That's where the Constitution couldn't have been any more perfect.
We must make sure that it stays that way, because you and I know that there are some groups out there who would love to impose whatever they believe in on everyone and have one particular religion only. I think that would be a catastrophe.
Oh, it would be. And imposing a forced religion on people, I think that the vast majority of Americans would see that evil, and they would recognize it and rebel against it. They don't want any part of it. They want to be left alone when it comes to matters of religion. And I know there are some folks out there that have such deeply held convictions about their faith that they believe it's the only true faith. But what they got to be careful of is trying to force that on fellow Americans, or use the governmental power to inflict that on fellow. Exactly.
Their religion on everybody.
Exactly.
Else.
You got to be able to check yourself.
One of those.
What's that expression? You got to check yourself before you wrect yourself.
Right. And also, a lot of them I've seen and read books on it. Bottom line is, you believe my way or the highway, so to speak. And those are some very dangerous ideas. Let me ask you something. You're one of the few judges that I've known to have voter registration cards in your courtroom. Share with us your thoughts on that.
Well, let's just talk in general. How many Americans set out of the 2016 election? Wasn't it like 100 million? So, I mean, think about that for a second. 100 million Americans just not voting for President of the United States or any of their local officials. And that is mind-numbing. It's
you can't wrap your mind around it.
Right. You don't want any say in people who have power over you, that have power to restrict your freedoms. You don't want to be involved. It's disturbing, but so I figure, you know what? I can't tell people to vote Democrat or Republican as a judge. I can't campaign in the courtroom, and I don't. I just put those cards out there where they're able to take copies of the Constitution. There's a little white forms, and if they want to register to vote, I say, I encourage people to vote. Do whatever you want. Vote for whoever you want to vote for. Vote however you want to vote. But golly, as an American, just vote.
Yeah.
So I encourage people to take the voter registration cards and pass them out to their friends, family members, and coworkers, so that as Americans, we all participate in the process. It's so disturbing that so many Americans don't want to be involved in how government controls or has influence over their life. Not just the government itself, but the judiciary. Get involved, vote.
You know, I've heard some strange reasons given for not voting. Well, it was raining that day, or well, uh, I just don't have time. Uh, Other excuses like, well, it's not going to make any difference anyway. But isn't it your civic duty to vote and participate? It's supposed to be a Republican or a republic. In order to have a republic, you got to participate.
You know, I think that some people are turned off about voting because maybe they live in particular areas where, say, they're a Democrat and they live in a Republican area, or maybe they're a Republican and they live in a very strongly Democratic area, and they feel like, you know what, my vote's just not going to count for anything. Um, I would say step out of that line of thinking and think about it a different way. Um, uh, think about all the other people that have done things for you, whether you knew them or not, that fought for your right to vote. My grandfather fought in World War II, and what I remember about him as a little boy, and he earned the Bronze Star, by the way. I'm proud of my grandpa. What I remember about him as a little boy is that his legs were full of Nazi shrapnel, little bulges of metal that, because when you're injured in the battlefield, they just try to get the pieces of metal away from your vital organs. They're not going to clean your whole body out.
Right.
So if you're hit by a mortar round or a grenade round and you're littered with metal throughout your body, well, you're just littered with metal throughout your body that you're going to live with for the rest of your life. And he had little bumps on his legs and some of them in his arms too, where the shrapnel was trying to get out through the skin, but the pores of the skin don't allow metal to get out. And I'll never forget what my grandfather did for me and what he did for all fellow Americans. I have two bailiffs in my courtroom. One of my bailiffs' names is Hollis Edwards, and he's a former high-ranking officer in the Dallas Police Department. And he also served, I think, either 6 months or a year in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about what that man, he did for me even before I was born. He was over there in Vietnam up to his knees in rice paddies and poisonous snakes, being somewhere where he didn't want to be as a very, very young man, fighting on behalf of our nation. And I would just say to all your listeners out there, even if you live in an area where you feel like your vote isn't going to count very much, and I can't honestly look at you if you do live in one of those areas and say, come on, your vote counts. I can't be a liar. I can't look at people and say, if you live in a 35% Democratic area and you're a Democrat, that your vote necessarily is going to defeat the Republican. I can't lie to you, and I won't.
Right.
But what I would tell you is vote every time just to honor those people in your family, or your friends or honor those people that have done things for you by potentially risking their lives for your right to vote and for the service that they've provided. Just recognize them and honor them all the time. Show up every time and vote, just to express your opinion, because people did things for you to make sure that you always have the right to vote. Mm-hmm. You need to show up every time to honor those friends, family members, and other loved ones who have done things for you, maybe before you were born.
You're right. We have something in common. Both of the men that I call dad, one, my father, and my father-in-law, both of them were at the Battle of the Bulge. My dad was a full bird colonel, and he was under the command of George S. Patton. My father-in-law, he was a sergeant. And growing up, knowing that, they fought, and the Bulge was a crucial battle. The Germans were so effective that they came within 100, maybe 150 yards at the most, of seizing a gasoline dump, which would, if they had got it intact, the U.S. Army would have been defeated and had to retreat. And and I know that civil rights was something that was totally not universal at that time period. But they fought hard, they fought for their country, because they believed that their country had a better future coming.
Yeah, I mean, so you know, again, you honor those who came before you when you vote, and then there are particular folks within our community that you got to recognize the struggle that occurred in American history for you to get the right to vote. I mean,
Sure.
women, the people that are listening right now who are women haven't had the right to vote even 100 years in our country.
Exactly.
And they still don't, you know, as you know, there are disparities in what women earn versus men who do the very same job. You know, women still haven't reached true equality yet in our society. So, you know, if I were a woman, then I'd be like, I'm going to vote every damn time. And obviously, we know the struggles of African Americans in American history. Even after African Americans earned the right to vote, they've constantly been harassed with poll taxes, literacy tests, get rid of the polling locations in their areas, make them travel further, reduce the number of early days of early voting, constantly messing with African Americans to make it unbearable, annoying as hell. And I would say to those folks, spite the bastards and stand in line until you have had your say. And until you have voted, don't get out of that line. Spite the bastards that are trying to screw with you and mess with your right to vote.
You're right. I remember the 2008 election, and being a precinct chair, I had not seen voting lines that long in my life. Some of the people who were in line, the lines were in the school, out the door, all the way out to the street, and wrapped around the entire city block. And the turnout and that level of participation, it was pretty much unheard of until then. But we need to understand that we're going to have to do that all the time in order to protect what we have. And I will go on record and say this, okay? There's an old expression, you don't miss your water till your well runs dry. Well, you don't miss your rights until someone tries to take them away. So we must do a better job in getting out that vote. And 2018, I think it's a crossroads.
Yeah, I mean, if voters, there's an old expression in politics that Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. And Republicans are, and I have lots of friends who are Republicans, but they are very regimented voters. Obviously, there's a segment of the Republican Party that is very ideologically driven. These, you know, either tax ideologues, you know, money ideologues, or the more fanatical might be the folks that are driven by religion. And they believe they're on a holy mission to cleanse the United States of certain types of people. You know, they're almost angry about the type of society that we have today. You just walk around, you can get in your car right now, Fred, and drive around to our country. Nobody's going to ask you for your papers. You can practice any religion. I don't understand why they're so angry. But I would say to the Democrats, look, there's Barack Obama's done. Okay, he's going to continue to campaign, but if you're waiting for the next Barack Obama, then there's only one Barack Obama, and no one's going to duplicate him. And there was only one Bill Clinton. Both of those men had enormous political talent. So if you're going to wait to fall in love every time, and you're going to sit out until you fall in love again,
we're in trouble.
Well, exactly. The Republicans will be more than happy to have you sit out elections while they control everything. That's why we got to get rid of this whole, well, I'm not in love with the candidate thing, so I'm not sure I'm fired up. I get that. Some people are electric. Some people have great charisma, and some don't. Hillary Clinton was not an exciting candidate, but she was certainly smarter than Donald Trump, and now look at it. There was some lower Democratic turnout than there needed to be, and we have suffered the consequences for our failure just to, as Americans,
just to turn out and do our job.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, darn it, even if you're not fired up, you still have to look yourself in the mirror and say, it's my duty, it's my obligation, and I know I need to get out there and vote. Otherwise, the people that I disagree with are going to win, and they're going to hold power over me. So
some of those people that we disagree with, you could find them, what's it called, Charlottesville, like when there were marches reminiscent of the Nazi torch marches. And I never thought I'd see that here. I'm well aware of what the 1940s was, but to me, it told me that if I don't continue doing my job and my job well, you can even have another Hitler right here.
I don't, obviously the presidency of Donald Trump is creating all kinds of problems in our nation as far as our ability to relate to one another, and he has certainly fostered, he has not failed to kind of go to the race card when he needs to in an effort to try to stroke some intensity that doesn't need to be out there. I don't believe at this point that we're anywhere close to something as dangerous as what you're talking about. But I do agree that the Republican Party they eventually are going to have to confront some of those. Let's just say what it is. I mean, they've got some folks that are operating as conservatives that are not. Some of them are just, unfortunately, let's just say some of them are racist. They've got to confront them. The Democrats had to confront them when they were in the Democratic Party, the so-called Dixiecrats.
Right.
And then they had to force them out, and then they fled elsewhere, and we know where they fled.
They went to the Republican Party.
Yeah, but now again, I want to be careful that since you and I are talking, I have lots and lots and lots of Republican friends who are very upset with the presence of some of these white supremacists within their party. Right. And they want to get rid of them. The problem is, how do they get rid of them? How do they get them out? Because they know what they risk. To the extent that they tell these people to get lost, they might lose elections that they don't think they should lose or don't want to lose. So they have a problem. But they know that they've got to get rid of these people who are now proudly displaying Nazi flags, exactly, pro-Trump, because that's not what the Republican Party is about. They know it, we know it, but they've got to confront these people and tell them to get lost. And I think that eventually the Republican Party, you're seeing it right now. I mean, Jeff Flake resigned the other day, the Senate, the Republican, the freshman senator of Arizona. You're seeing the party itself struggle with Donald Trump and how to deal with him. And some of these people that are now, parading themselves proudly with Nazi flags and calling themselves conservatives. No. They're just.
My question,
they're clowns.
About the two senators, rather than stand up, maintain, and stay in office. All right, so what? You may lose the election, but stand your ground. Stand up on the principles of freedom and justice. If I were in those shoes, hey, I'm not going to give way to let somebody come in who espouses those type of philosophies. Hey, stand and fight. Okay, fine. If they're successful in defeating you, go down fighting.
Yeah, this is his career, and again, we're talking about Senator Flake, the U.S. representative from Arizona, who announced he's not going to run for re-election, and it's difficult to tell somebody what to do with their career. I know what you're saying. It's just kind of like, well, why don't you save the Republican Party? Why don't you be the savior in Arizona and fight the good fight and say this is not what we stand for? This kind of rabid anti all government kind of my way or the highway, right. My way or the highway philosophy. There's no question that Jeff Flake was a conservative. I mean, it's interesting to watch Republican politics now because you can't be far enough to the right. They keep going they want to outright wing each other. And Flake there's no question the man was a conservative. And now he's like thought of as a Republican in name only, a so-called rhino. It's a shame because the Republican Party is tearing itself apart. And I know a lot of people that are proudly Republican are just shaking their heads at, how do we deal with Donald Trump? Because the Republican Party, they know there's a value to government. They know they need certain regulations. What the Trump team is doing to the EPA and environmental regulations, I don't know a lot of educated Republicans that are in favor of that. They know that government serves a purpose in their lives, that it prevents chaos. And
he brings chaos.
Yes, he does, and they know it. And I don't know if you saw or not, but Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee admitted the other day in an interview that he wouldn't have supported Donald Trump if he had to do it all over again. I mean, some Republicans, prominent, powerful Republicans, have a lot of regret about having supported somebody for public office, the highest public office in our land, who simply was unqualified to serve in that capacity. And now they are paying a painful price. He's turning on them. And the Republican Party is paying a price for this.
They're paying a price. We, the American public, we are paying a price. And I think that if we could just have senators and Congress men and women stand up and just say, hey, enough of this. And if it doesn't stop, the recourse, which probably won't happen with the Republican House, impeach him and just get him out. I think that's and that's the process. And it takes time. Just like all these investigations, I have never in my life, and as you know, I'm not a young man, I have never seen so many investigations going on and swirling around the executive management in my entire life. Even Richard Nixon was not anywhere near as troublesome as the current president. I'll go on the line and I'll tell anybody that. But we want to thank you for coming in and talking with us today. Let it not be the last time, and we wish you well. We do know that you have an opponent. Would you address that issue just for?
Well, I do have. I found out last week that I evidently am going to have somebody run against me for County Court of Law number 4. It's unfortunate, and the person has essentially been recruited by a couple of lawyers who were unhappy with the decision that I made in a medical malpractice case, which was affirmed by the Court of Appeals. I know this. I know I'm a good judge. I know I'm a good Democrat, and if Democrats get out to vote, and people that care about the type of judges that we have, then I know that I'm going to win that race. And I would ask your listeners politely to vote for Ken Tapscott, County Court of Law number 4. And I also want to say something else to them. I'm the presiding judge of the Central Jury Room next week.
Great.
So I'll be swearing in everybody who shows up for jury service at the George Allen Courthouse next week. So if you've got a jury summons out there, please show up for jury service. We need everyone in Dallas County to show up. We have about a 15 to 20% attendance rate. And the same thing that goes for jury service applies, like what we talked about for voting. Show up because it's your duty as a citizen, but show up to honor those who sacrificed for you to be able to have jury trials and to sit as jurors to help decide cases in Dallas County, whether it be criminal or civil. Do your civic duty and encourage your friends, family members, and coworkers to do the same thing.
Okay. Well, thank you, Judge. We're going to go to break for about 2 minutes, and then we'll be back.
All right. Thank you
again. Mm-hmm.